Horayot Daf Rima, continuing from Daf Bet Amud Bet, 25 lines down, it's around halfway down. Last words are Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shemuel Zutiv Rabbi Yehuda. We said that what halacha we just mentioned now, that regarding a person who listens to Bedin, and when Bedin made a mistake, he's patur from bringing his own korban hatat. So Rabbi Yehuda says that's only according to Rabbi Yehuda. Aval hachamim omrim, hachamim hold, yahid she'asa be'orat bedin hayav. An individual who listens to bedin, he's hayav to bring a personal hatat. He's not patur. Okay. My Rebida, where do we see the source of Rebida? The Tanya Brit says, "Ve'im nefesh ahat tehayda bishchacha ba'asota." If a person, yani one person, will make a avirah by mistake by sinning. Hare elu shlosha mi'utin. We have three different words that are exclusions. We had the word one, we had the word one soul, and his, yani one person. So we see ha'asim bipi asmo hayav. If he did it by himself, he's hayav. B'horat bedin patur, but he listens to bedin, is patur. My Rabbanan, where's the source of Rabbanan? Who argues? Tana Rabbanan says, Adayin ani omer, mi'ud kahal shahatu hayavin. If a minority of Bnei Israel sinned, each person should bring his own korban hatat. She'em betin mevin aydein par, because betin does not bring a korban for minority. However, rov kahal shahatu yiyu peturin. Now, if you might think that a majority of Bnei Israel, they should be patur from bringing a korban, Sharei betin mevin aydein par, because betin has to bring a korban. Tamilmar therefore says ma'aretz from the people, among the people, afil ruba ba'afil kula. That even if majority or the entire Bnei Israel sins, besides for the korban that Betin has to bring of par and davar, they still have to bring their own korban. One second. What's the case talking about? If you're saying we're minority or majority sinned without Betin making a mistake, why would we involve Betin if they didn't make a mistake? Bedin mimay tishlo barab. Would they bring a korban if they didn't make a bad decision? If Bedin did not say a incorrect ruling, then obviously Bedin's not involved. So that can't be talking about the case. Ela barab must be talking about the case where Bedin did make a bad mistake. But the problem is, v'hakiktiv be'im ma'am ma'aretz, we said, from people of the land, which is a pasuk that teaches you a korban, that they have a korban when majority sins. Bishchagat ma'aseh, that's talking about a case where they made a mistake without Betin making a mistake. Bnei Israel makes the mistake, not Betin. So how can you use this pasuk to teach me that you're chayav for korban hatat because of Betin? Not connected. Tomorrow says, okay, elalav hachi kama, tomorrow case, mi'ud kahal shahatu bishchagat ma'aseh. Tomorrow case where minority of Bnei Israel sinned through a mistake without Betin. Hayavin, they're chayav a korban hatat. She'en Betin miv'in aidain parara, because the Betin did make a mistake in that scenario, yani minority, they don't bring a korban because it's only minority. Hahen hayavim, which means Bnei Israel chayav. Yachol rov sibur she'asu b'shgar ma'aseh yipatir. Now you might have thought that if Bnei Israel make their own mistake, majority of Bnei Israel make their own mistake, you might think they should be patur because Share Bedin mevin alhen para, because if Bedin had caused them to sin, they'd be patur. And Mullah says me'ama aretz, from the people afirubo, even the majority of Bnei Israel sin. If they were not listening to Bedin, they're still chaya. Amar Papa Mimai, who says this is what I'm teaching you? Dilma lohem v'lo Bedin. Maybe in the case, who says? Maybe in the case where if Bedin did not, if Bedin was not involved. Sorry, if Bedin was involved, but it's minority of Bnei Israel, maybe no one brings it. They're patur because they listen to Bedin. Bedin's patur because it was only minority. So maybe no one brings a korban. So maybe that's the case. Why would the Tana go to bring a pasuk source to teach you that you have for a hatat for majority? But the Tana went back to prove that. He said, "Oh, if you have a case, a majority without Bedin's ruling, you'd be hayab." Why would that make a difference if minority would patur? Lav michal sounds like mi'ut sounds like if minorities hayab, that's why you would need to prove also that majority is hayab. Whereas v'nehadera beresha al mi'ut hayab b'shul. One second, maybe you could say that according to Rabbi that the Tanakh should say that first the minority who sins by mistake without bet din is chayav. Ubasov, then you have to prove that you're chayav, even the majority you're chayav. Ella must be. Midloma daral hiyud mehayvin mishama says, since we first did not teach that minority is chiyab without Betin's ruling, وبسوف ما daral rubah yahiyuva b'shema said, then you had to teach another source regarding majority. Shema mina mi'ud b'hora'a hayavin hen kisbab su'ira. Teaches you that minority of Bnei Israel. It could happen. If minority of Bnei Israel decided that a certain thing's mutar instead of asur, if that happened, they'd have to bring a korban hatat of a sheep or a goat. V'shelo b'hara b'shka'ah ma'aseh, and if they did it without Bedin saying anything, they are, but in a mistake, having their chayav hatat. Okay. Mechti. Now let's check things out. Tabayot stamet tanan. Both Beratot were taught without mentioning who the author is. Bimai de kamaita de Beribida. Who says the first one is going to Beribida? Ubatayta de Rabban, the second one's Hachamim. Imma ibcha. Maybe it's the opposite. Right? Who said that's exactly how we're looking at it? And we have to explain each one according to each one. Maybe it's the opposite. When it says man shema'at le derish mi'uta ki hagavna, who did we see teaches exclusionary topics in Pesukim? Meaning we said, oh, the fact that it said his and one soul and one person, we say who else learns mi'ut that way? Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanya verse says Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda says top of Amud Gimal of Daf Gimal, Zotorat ha'ola hi ha'ola hare elu shlosha mi'utim. We see over there the pasuk regarding the Bida, it teaches you from the Pasuk of Ola, he also learns mi'utin, exclusionary words. Ibn a different answer, Loma Sid Mokmat Bida. The second Braita can't be according to Rizat. The Ktani Rov Kahal Shahatu Bedin V'imnya Devavari, because that Braita said that if a majority of Bnei Israel sins, Bedin brings a Korban. V'ir Bida, but according to Bida, he doesn't say that. Ha'amar Tzibur D'mati, he says the Bnei Israel brings the Korban, Bedin lo, Bedin doesn't. The Tanakh Mishnah says, Bida Mer, Shiva Shivatim Shahatu, seven Shivatim sin, maybe in Shiva Parim they bring the seven korbanot, and Batin's not chayav, therefore it can't fit according to him. Okay, hang in there. But Nachman says the name of Shmuel. Zudra Mered, this Mishnah teaches us the Mishnah that said that one person who acts according to Batin's ruling, mistaken ruling, patur for bringing his own korban, is according to the mayor. Ava Hachmim say Yahid she'asa v'ra'at Bedin hayav. A person acts out of relying on Bedin is hayav to bring a korban. My Rabbi Meir Maran, where do we see this machlokes? The Tanakh says Haruva asu. Bedin made ruled, and then they acted on it. Rabbi Omeir or Pater Rabbi says patur from bringing a korban. V'chachamim mahayvin hachamim zir chayav. Man asu. Now, who acted? Even Bedin, if you found Bedin acted on their own words, my time at the Ran behind, why would Hamim say Chayav? Vatan verse says, Yachol Huru Bedin, Asu Bedin. You might think that if Bedin ruled a mistake and then Bedin themselves acted on it, Yachol Haim maybe they would be Chayav to bring a Korban of a pardon davar. Tumar, Hakahal Asu. The Pasuk facilitates you're only Chayav of a pardon davar if Bnei Israel listened. Ma'asli Bekahal must be that this Korban of Par Ha'adam davar is only conditioned on the Bnei Israel. And it must be the ruling comes from Bedin. So this cannot be told in a case where Bedin listens. Elo Haru Bedin, V'asur Rav Kama must be the case where Bedin gave the rule and Bnei Israel acted on it. And therefore the Hachamim then have a Tanaim rather have a machloket on what the halacha is. My tamad Meir Patir, then why would Meir hold a patur for them to bring a pardon davar if Bnei Israel sinned? Seemingly that's the picture perfect case of Horayot that we're talking about. Where I said, Bedin made a rule, and minority of Bnei Israel listened. More so, Meir holds, if an individual minority acted on Bedin's rulings, patur from a personal hatat. Or more so, hold, individual or minority who acts on Bedin's ruling will be hayav. Amar Papa says the kula amar really everybody holds yahid shasa bedin patur. Individual listens is patur, like our Mishnah. Ela bedin mashlim berov tzibur community mahloket is whether or not bedin is counted to make it a majority. Right. So we said before previously, majority is most of Bnei Israel. If you have 50-50, and Bedin is one of the people listening to their own ruling, can they push the scale to make it majority and then basically invoke those rules of majority as well? So more so Hamim hold Betin Mashlim Lizrav Tzibor they are included, and therefore they would need to bring the Param Davar. But more so Rameir holds and Betin Mashlim Lizrav Tzibor they're not included, and therefore if it's not 51% without them, there's no Param Davar. Whether or not different answer, Horu Betin Vasuba Tamar case where Betin ruled and a majority listened. Uman Hachamim, why would Hachamim disagree? Because who's according to Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Shimon, Damar Tzibur Maiti, Betin Maiti, he holds both Bnei Israel and Betin bring the Qurban. Then with a different answer, Shevet She'asa, Horad Betin was about a case of a tribe who acted based off the ruling of its own court, of that Shevet's court. Uman Hachamim Muzahamim, Bidayat according to Rabbi Dada. He says Shevet She'asa Betin, Oto Shevet Hayav, that Hayav was their Hayav. Then the fourth answer, Kigon Shahatu Shisha Vehen Rubo Shakal. It's about a case where six Shivatim sinned, which is half the Shivatim of Bnei Israel, but they have majority of people. So it's 1,000,000 people, they have 501,000 people, and they are six Shivatim. Or the opposite type of majority, Shiv'a Afapisha Inan Ruba Shakal. So it's seven tribes, but they don't have the numerical majority. So it's seven tribes, but it's under 50% amount of people. Umati Mani, who's according to Rabbi Shimon Lazar, he's according to him. The Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Zamer, Mishamo, he said the name of Rabbi Meir. Hatu Shisha Behin Ruba Shakal, if six tribes sinned and they are majority, or Shiv'a Afapisha Inan Ruba Shakal, if seven tribes sinned, even though they're not majority men, Hayavin, they're still Hayav Param Daba. Okay, what about say regarding to the ruling? You go with the majority of people living in Eretz Yisrael. They are the only ones who are counted, not people in Chutz La'aretz. Shenemar, as we see by the Bet HaMikdash of Shlomo Melech, ויעש שלמה בעת ההיא את החג וכל ישראל עמו קהל גדול מלבוא חמת הנחל מצרים לפני השם אלוקינו 7 ימים ב7 ימים 14 יום. Right now, Mechti, what do we see from here? See, v'chol Yisrael imo kahal gadol. It says, Bnei Israel with him a huge congregation. Milevo hamat ad nahal Mitzrayim lamli. Why didn't you teach me where they were? Shlomo now is teaching you. Hani hu dikrei kahal, abahanach lo kahal. Only those who are in the borders of Israel considered part of the nation. If not, not. We should all make aliyah. Okay. Pshita merubim bin ma'atu. It's obvious if we see the majority of Bnei Israel and then they decreased. Hanu plutat Rabbi Shimon ben Madran. So now let's say majority of Bnei Israel sin, and before they bring the kapara, some of them died. Now they don't have majority. So now that is obviously that would be the same achlok between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbanan, whether or not you're chayav. Mu'atim bin Rabbi Maya. What if it's the opposite? Meaning, if minority sinned and majority did not sin, but then the people who did not sin, some of them died, and now you have minority overwhelming the initial minority is now majority. Would that same achlok apply or not? Rabbi Shimon Now Rabbi Shimon says that you go according to the initial awareness. So he holds you chayav. The Rabbanan hold you go according to the Avera. So Rabbi Shimon holds the awareness. When's the awareness? When you realize now that the minority is now the majority, the awareness is now the new majority, and now they have chayav. Rabbanan hold no, you go according to the sinning, and the sinning was when they were minority, and they fear about their Allah. Maybe not. Gemara says, "My was halacha." Gemara says, "But you can't compare the cases." In which Rabbi Shimon, when we say that, like Rabbi Shimon, he only follows the awareness to make you hayab is when the awareness and the transgression apply them at the same time of hayu. However, but if it's not a case where the awareness and the avera and the transgression is in different times, you can't compare that. That's the case, then the person in that case that we're bringing up at Daf Yod, it's not a case where a guy sinned or made an erroneous ruling, and then he became Nasi or Kohen HaMashuach. So they have different korbanot. So do we go according to when he was a commoner, or do we go according to now when he's the Kohen or the Nasi? So he says that that's so simple, and you just make him bring a korban. Ella Rabbi Shimon must be that he's saying that it's not so pashut. Rabbi Shimon would require hatat based on the moment of the avira and the awareness. Okay, by the who. Harubatin halib mutar. What if Bati made a ruling that halib is mutar? Now, which is obviously asur. And minority Bnei Israel listened. And then Betin retracted. They said, we made a mistake. And then they again ruled that the same piece of halib is actually mutar. So they said that this asur item is mutar, 20% sinned, They retracted, and then they re-retracted and said it's really mutar, and then 20% sinned. Mahu. So we'll call it 25 and 60, 26%. So now you have 51%. Kevin the Shay is the ordinary no low we say that since there's two different awarenesses, these two don't combine to 51%. Odima Kevin the idi halib who maybe since they're both considered halib, they can combine. Second question. Kevin the idi halib who if you want to tell me that since they're both halib, they should combine. Miut بحلب شعال جبيها هكباب miut حلب شعال جبي كداكين. What are the two different types of halib? What if one's a halib that's in the stomach, and the other one's in the type of intestines? Is that considered a combination? Since there's two different halibs mentioned in the Pesukim, they don't combine? Maybe since they're both called halib, it should combine. Nice question. Maybe you want to say since they're both halib, they can combine. Mi'ud b'halib, mi'ud b'dama. What if they made one ruling in regarding to halib, one ruling regarding to blood? Hachavadai tred isurin, since they're both considered different isurim. One's regarding a mistake regarding fat, and one's regarding blood. Maybe that's definitely shouldn't combine. Becoming the answer shouldn't combine because of that reason. However, you can also look at the Kurban Shavim instead. Maybe since they have the same Kurban, they should have combined. If you want to tell me, you know what, they do have the same Kurban, they should have combined. What if they made one mistake regarding the Halib and one mistake regarding Avodah Zarah? Since there's no common denominator, there should be regarding their Isur and the Kurban. Maybe they should not combine. Odima Kevan the Idi Karet, who instead of since they're both Karet, they do combine. Tekel, we don't answer any of them. Okay, by the way, I have a question. Horubatin shahil mutar. They made a announcement that halil is mutar. V'asum l'utaka minority of Bnei Israel listened. Umet to badin, that badin died. V'amar badin aher v'hazru v'horu. And then another badin got up and also ruled the same thing. V'asum aher, and a different minority acted on it. Can those two separate minorities from two separate bedins combine? Ali b'demanda mar bedino bedin ma'iti l'dibach. According to bedin holds that bedin has to bring the korban. No question. The halatino because the first bedin is not existing anymore. Where is the question according to Ali b'demanda mar tzibur ma'iti is according to only the opinion that says that Bnei Yisrael brings it. Ma'in was halacha tzibur ha'kai. We say since Bnei Yisrael still is here, they should bring it. Odilma. Or maybe we need that awareness of that court, the initial court, to be there, and they're gone. Teku. If 100 judges got together to make a ruling and they made a mistake. Right? Sometimes it can happen, you need 100 judges. And all 100 judges have to be involved. Now, Pasuk has been called Aidat Israel Yeshku. Achi Yeshku Kulan, we bring this Pasuk to teach you that all judges have to be in consistency in order to make this a param davar. عكس الصوت الرعاة خواطر إزرع مرة number دي شو عشايا هاخنا مثال بس وز بروفيت خواطر كلها كاملا رباش كلها فاخا كتير كل هاي عادات however خلا أعطيه من المئة we prove this it has to be all because in general when the Torah mentions anything we go according to majority and over here the pasuk could have just said adat the eda but since it mentioned all of the eda called eda it must be you need every single one in order to make param davar. Not a single judge can be out of the question. Tom Mishnah says, Badin rules, and one of them knows they made a mistake. Also, one of the students knows a mistake, but they still listened. Ben what they did with him, Ben who did after them, Ben they did after, did not do it at all. هل لازم حيبز خياف ببني شلوط لاب بدين كذا بدين بيحيبي وما خياف على الباتور بقى معي حاول نقول 1 second he's خياف بقلب الباتور. But why is everybody Torah? We said I feel you need everybody to be involved. Not everybody was involved. One guy disagreed. But it's one case. So like that judge who didn't agree, even though he didn't agree, he still nodded his head. That's not bringing proof. If one judge said you made a mistake, they're still patur. If he said you're mistaken, that's what Bador. But if he didn't, if he stayed quiet, however, sounds like implying and the ruling will be considered complete. Why is it complete? But they didn't agree. Maybe in that case, it's also not a case. He's talking about where he's nodding. عصير مشارشي أصلا خربتين على دبريراش باغ بعد الفيرد بازار بربي ستوك شيء من these to say إن جوزين زي تبور you can't make exit on people إلا يمكن روف حسيبور يحن عمل balance people can comply with it meaning you can't make a decree on بني إسرائيل that they can't handle أمر بعد برابا مايك راورز بازوك تشيزس بمئرا أتم نارين بعطي أتم كوبين محاكوي كلا whereas ha chadiktiv hagoy kulon the entire nation v'ruba kekulam meaning that majority is like oh tiyuf Rabbi Yochanan tiyuf we have a question against Rabbi Yochanan right we said Rabbi Yochanan said earlier that the decree has to be tolerated by the entire nation but a majority is sufficient so that same thing should apply to the judges the person says if you that's a good question but the might call that the Kamar so then according to that what would it say the entire in assembly Hachi Kamar teaches as follows. Ika kulam, if the entire batin is there, Habi Hora'a is considered a ruling. Be low, but if it's not, Lo Habi Ar is not a good ruling. Amar Bashia, Asar Shashim Bedin, 10 men sitting in judgment, Kolar Tuli B'Tzavar Kulan, the responsibility hangs on all their necks. This should sound familiar from Maseches Sanhedrin. Hakim Moshe teaches you that Afil Tamid B'Fein Abo, even a student sitting in front of his teacher, sits in responsibility and shares that responsibility of the judgment. Rav Huna ki have an afik the bedina when Rav Huna would call judgment. Ma'ati asra tanayed the Rav like may take 10 tzaddikim with him. Ki echin de benatan shibad makshrei. So each one would receive a chip of the punishment, meaning they would share responsibility of them. Rav Ashi ki have mati terefta lekamei. Whenever they're bringing a question of a terefa in front of him, Ma'ati asra tabachim mata mayase. He would bring 10 butchers from Masa Mehsa. Motit come in, they would ask them. Amar, he would say, Ki echad dentin shiba mekushrei. We all share on that responsibility just to show how severe responsibility is when you're taking it upon all people. Prophet,